My name is Ethan Petrick, and this is...
Whoa, he has trouble with the snap, and the ball is free. It's picked up by Michigan State's Jalen Watts Jackson, and he scores on the last play of the game. Kellogg's throw. It's going to be tipped and caught. It's caught. It's caught. It's a touchdown, Western Carolina. You can't believe what just happened. What a time to be alive. Diving touchdown, Nebraska. Davison on the deflection. Nebraska's a point away. Rosen fakes the spike. In the end zone, touchdown. Whoa.
Oh, they don't have him yet. Look at Tommy Frazier. How many tackles can one man break?
35-30. It'll be Galloway down the sideline. He's going to score. He's going to score. He's going to score. It's a touchdown. How much?
What up? Welcome into the Save Saturdays U podcast. This is the Save Saturdays College Football Show, hosted by me, Ethan Petrick. Welcome into the first episode. We got a great show for you today. A couple of fans from the Save Saturdays podcast will recognize Nicholas Trevino from a couple episodes ago on the Save Saturdays podcast. He's back talking all things Texas football. It's a great interview. Had it last night. He's got a lot of great stuff to say, and things aren't looking too good in Austin for the Longhorns, but we'll get into that in a little bit. Starting off, let's go with some winners and losers from Week 5 in college football. Number one winner is going to be non-Blue Bloods from the Big 12 Conference. Iowa State defeating Oklahoma. Kansas State, they were off this week, but they did get to continue to ride that wave from being the first team to upset Oklahoma. Also, TCU taking down those Longhorns, as I alluded to just a moment ago. Big win for the Horned Frogs. I don't think a lot of people had that one pegged as a potential upset. Texas was looking fairly good this year. They had an extra week to prepare for that game, and it looks like the Longhorns were just caught looking past their opponents from TCU. So I would say that those three teams are the biggest winners, and then Oklahoma State as well. They're the last hope, really, for the Big 12, and they're still undefeated. Not a traditional power in that conference, but they do have an exceptional team this year. Chuba Hubbard and Spencer Sanders, Tylan Wallace, all exceptional offensive players. As long as all those guys can stay healthy, get back to full health, I think Oklahoma State has a chance to run the table, win the Big 12, and make their first appearance in the college football playoff. Is that in the cards for Mike Gundy's team down in Stillwater? We will see. I like to feel confident. I almost made that prediction on the Save Saturdays podcast a couple weeks ago. I got cold feet at the last second, but I really like what's going on down in Stillwater. There's exceptional potential there. The only obstacle standing in their way is a potential upset from a non-blue blood, as we've seen Oklahoma and Texas befall. But I do not anticipate that happening with the Cowboys of Stillwater, simply because of their exceptional ability to score. Another winner from Week 5 is Kyle Pitts. He put together a 4-reception, 57-yard, and 2-touchdown performance. It wasn't the performance he put together against Ole Miss, but it continued his immense success this season. He's got 6 touchdowns on the season, 12 receptions for 227 yards, 6 touchdowns. He's averaging a touchdown every other catch. Can't get much better than that for Kyle Pitts. Talk about a guy who he was already projected to be a top option at the tight end position in this next draft. However, talk about a guy just cementing himself well within that top conversation. I don't think there's any disputing right now. He is the best tight end in the next draft class, and will likely be the first tight end to hear his name called. A lot of people were talking about Pat Freiermuth coming out of Penn State. He's an exceptional tight end as well. Probably a more complete tight end. It's kind of a TJ Hawkinson, Noah Fant debate. Fant the better receiver, Kyle Pitts a better receiver, and TJ Hawkinson was a more complete tight end, whereas Freiermuth also a more complete tight end. I do not anticipate we'll see what happened with Hawkinson and Fant, where Hawkinson will go first. I think Kyle Pitts is separating himself so much as a receiver of the football that he will push himself above Freiermuth so far that any team would be ridiculous to not take Pitts over Freiermuth. So we'll see how that continues to go. Right now, I would have to say Kyle Pitts is easily the best tight end in the country, no questions asked. And I hope he keeps it going. At this point, he's well within the top 20 pick conversation. It's exceptionally high for a tight end, and I'm loving where this season's headed for Kyle Pitts, and I hope it continues. Moving on, our last winner from Week 5 is LSU and Miles Brennan. Miles Brennan specifically put together a 23 for 37, 337 yards, and 4 touchdown performance with 1 interception. And I think if you look at the narrative following the Week 1 loss to Mississippi State, a lot of people were down on Miles Brennan and those LSU Tigers because of just the sheer letdown from going from one of the best teams probably in the country to being the laughingstock of every meme on social media. But Ole Miss responds after their 44-34 loss to Mississippi State. They respond. They take down Vanderbilt 41-7. Now, you might say it was Vanderbilt. It doesn't count. They're barely an SEC team. But to that, I say this. Texas A&M, top 25 team, only beat Vandy 17-12. It's the pandemic season. We've seen a lot of underdogs upset the big dogs. It's not out of the question. If Vanderbilt had beaten LSU, I would not have been surprised. I'd be like, wow, that's a really bad look for Miles Brennan and Orgeron. But they beat them, and they beat them handedly. Brennan didn't look uncomfortable in the pocket like he did in that first game. He just looked like he'd gotten all his jitters out of the way. 84.8 QBR. And the running game was also working for LSU with around, what is it here? Yeah, put together 161 yards on the ground. That's 5 yards per attempt for those Tigers. And throw on top of it that they also were able to get 2 touchdowns on the ground. So if you look at the LSU Tigers, they saw that loss that they took in Week 1. They addressed the weaknesses, and they came back stronger in Week 5 and showed the country that, yeah, we were sleepwalking Week 1, which was actually Week 4. We were sleepwalking against Mississippi State, but no one's going to catch us like that again. We took that punch on the chin. We're back for round 2, round 3, round 4, round 5. So don't think these Tigers are out of it. They can play with anybody in the SEC, and they can win every game that they're going to play the rest of the year. Coming up, they have Missouri next, but after Missouri, they have a big game against number 4 Florida. So there's potential for LSU to get them reinsert themselves into the conversation. They will play all of the top teams in the SEC. They have a very tough schedule, which I wouldn't like if I was a Tigers fan, but seeing how much potential there is for the Tigers to respond to that early loss has to give you some hope, and I'm going to have to consider them a winner from this past week of college football. Moving on to the losers. Let's talk about those Big 12 playoff chances. Those are in the tank right now. You look at the teams coming in who have top billing, probably the teams that you would consider most likely out of the conference to make the college football playoff. Oklahoma has made the playoff a number of times. Certainly consider them to be a favorite to make the college football playoff again, given that they were a top 10 team coming into the season, they take their second loss of the season. They were already a loser last week, losing to Kansas State. That is already a black mark on your resume, a team who lost to Arkansas State in their first game. So Oklahoma, already down on their luck, take another loss to Iowa State, and you have to think that there's no way a 2-loss Oklahoma with losses to Kansas State and Iowa State, both teams who lost to group of 5 teams week 1, Kansas State to Arkansas State, Iowa State to UL Lafayette. So I have to say Oklahoma has been officially eliminated from playoff contention. Sorry, Sooners, it's not happening this year. Texas, there's hope. It's fleeting. Taking the loss to TCU was a huge blow to not only Texas's playoff chances, but also Tom Herman's probable future in Austin. This is a guy who, in his 4 years at Texas, has gone 27-16. You have to think that the Longhorn fans are getting tired of these collapses. Texas, they can go in and they can play with the big dogs. They've won their bowl game 2 years in a row against a top-ranked Utah and a top-ranked Georgia team. But these regular season collapses from Tom Herman keep happening. This is a guy who only lost 4 games at Houston. Gets the job at Texas, and he can't put together a season as good as the seasons he put together in Houston. He has got better players in Houston against an arguably bottom 2 Power 5 conference in the Big 12. Right in the middle of the state of football, Texas, and Tom Herman can't put together a squad that's better than 10 wins? That's ridiculous. He should be on the hot seat right now. He needs to prove it this weekend. The Red River rivalry against Oklahoma. If he loses this game, I don't think there's a future for Tom Herman in Austin past this season. And I think Texas fans will agree with you. We'll see with Nick Trevino later what he thinks. But I can't imagine he would say it's time for Texas to be patient. They've been patient. Sam Ehlinger's been the quarterback there for 4 years now. The time was now in Texas, and you take a loss to a questionable TCU team who, on the season, has lost to the same Iowa State team that lost to UL Lafayette by the slimmest of margins, but still a 1-1 team that you should beat. And I am tempted to say that Southern Methodist University would have beaten TCU in that first game, given that they're 4-0 now, and TCU has lost to Iowa State. So Texas is quite lucky that their resume is not already shot. Moving on to another loser is just everybody who was a Mac Jones doubter or a Bryce Young champion. I will say I was a big fan of Bryce Young's out of high school. Coming in, I thought he had real potential to take over the Alabama starting QB position right out of the gate. I was dead wrong. Mac Jones is elite. So talk about a guy who was a 4-star recruit out of high school, did not look comfortable last year coming in to start for the injured Tua Tagovailoa. However, this year he looks like he could be a Heisman candidate. 20 for 27, 435 yards and 4 touchdowns with 1 interception in a crushing defeat of Texas A&M, 52-24. The game was never in doubt. At one point, I believe it was 7-7. I saw an update on ESPN. I was watching Boston College UNC. Texas A&M scored to tie up the game. The next update I saw, I believe it was 42-14. Alabama, they're rolling it back. I could extend this losers to anybody who doubted Nick Saban after last season. If you're doubting Mac Jones or Nick Saban right now, you took a fat L week 5. There's no doubts about it. They looked exceptional. The Final loser is the KJ Costello Heisman campaign. KJ Costello put up over 600 yards, breaking the record for the most yards against a former or a reigning national champion, first quarterback to go over 600 yards. And it was a dominant victory. Mississippi State took over that game early and never relinquished it, and the hype was real around KJ Costello for 1 week. How did he follow it up? 43 for 59, 323 yards, 1 touchdown, and 3 interceptions. Against who? Arkansas. Next to Vanderbilt, Arkansas is one of the worst SEC teams in the conference, and this is their first season with their new head coach. Of all the teams you could have lost to, I believe Arkansas might be the worst mark on your resume as a team, as a quarterback, and as a coach. So, KJ Costello's Heisman hopes, they were shattered after only 1 week. It was fun while you were here, but you are dead now. I am sorry. We'll catch you guys in 30 seconds with the interview from Nick Trevino. Be sure to stick around for that. It's going to be a great interview.
My dad's making it hurt.
What's going on, guys? We're back with the second segment of the first ever episode of Save Saturdays U. This will be a familiar voice, familiar name. We have Nicholas Trevino joining us again from the University of Texas. Nick, how are you doing today?
Pretty good yourself?
I'm doing all right. We're recording this on a Thursday again. I got toasted in a debate a little bit earlier from another one of our guests. It was pretty unfortunate, but other than that, I'm doing pretty good.
Good to hear.
So, were you at the Texas TCU game this week?
I was.
So, can you tell me what happened?
Yeah. Well, we lost. Put it simply. Throughout the game, the whole kind of environment, it kind of didn't feel like Texas was playing like they should have been. And the kind of, like, I guess the last domino was definitely Keontae Ingram on that last drive. The student section was pretty upset.
Going into halftime, they were trailing by 6. Were you nervous at all at halftime, given that this is a team they probably should have been beating handedly by halftime?
Yeah, Texas. I've been saying this for a while. Texas seems to always play up or down to their opponent, which is a terrible trait to have because it puts you in these close games all the time and allows you to lose games like this. TCU. We should have been leading at halftime. I wasn't exactly super nervous. I mean, Texas is with their comeback last week against Texas Tech. But, we still should have been up, and the second half just added to the agony, I guess.
Looking at the stats, it didn't look like anybody on Texas had a bad game. Looks like the rushing game was working, the passing game was working. Sam Ehlinger with 4 touchdowns. Can you pinpoint any one particular thing that you picked up on that Texas just wasn't doing as well as they normally do?
Well, their discipline was horrible. I guess that can kind of go both ways, but there was way too many penalties taken by Texas, and a lot of them just really hurt our momentum or just put us in tough situations that hurt us later on. And I think the play calling was definitely an issue. I don't necessarily agree with most of it, especially that last drive, 4 minutes left on the clock, and they got one drive to score a touchdown, and they're I think they played it a little too fast. TCU would have got the ball for sure if we had scored, but we didn't, of course. But
Take us through those couple of moments after the crucial Ingram fumble on the goal line there. What was it like in the stadium?
Well, at first, it was a little, couldn't really tell it was a fumble. And then TCU, their team kind of, you could kind of tell it was definitely a fumble. But initially, the stadium got really quiet, It was a first and goal situation, didn't score. So, routine. But then the stadium kind of figured out it was a fumble. And I was sitting in the student section, of course, and a lot of the students did not have kind words for Keontae Ingram after that unfortunate play.
What's been the kind of mood and atmosphere around campus this last week after you guys took your first loss of the season?
It was definitely kind of just like a lot of the upperclassmen. They were kind of just talking and general attitude of like being just like the other seasons, where we should have this really good team and we drop these games to far worse opponents when it really shouldn't happen. So yeah, general atmosphere and attitude is just like, well, this is going to be just another Texas Longhorn season.
Given that is kind of the sentiment from Longhorn Nation, at least on campus, do you feel that the seat, Tom Herman's seat, is getting fairly warm down in Texas? Do you think this could possibly be his last year?
Oh, I definitely do. I definitely feel like the heat is kind of on for him. I think he needs definitely to win the Big 12. I think if any less than winning the Big 12, I think his job will definitely be on the line and it would probably be unlikely he retains the job.
Looking ahead to this weekend, this is the Red River rivalry this weekend against Oklahoma. It's going to be a do-or-die game for the Longhorns. What are you expecting this weekend?
Yeah, this is definitely a do-or-die game, especially, for us and really for Oklahoma too, although they've been a little bit weaker this season. But, I'm honestly expecting a shootout, honestly. Both teams have great offenses, and both teams have shown that they have very, very weak defenses. So I think that's really what it's going to come down to is can Texas's defense hold off Spencer Rattler? I think our offense will be able to handle their defense and put up the point, but once again, it'll come down to their defense, our defense, and if they can stop the Sooner offense.
Do you think that Oklahoma is the last true test before a potential Big 12 championship?
Honestly, I think they would be the next contender in the Big 12. Oklahoma State is up there as well, but I think if we can beat Oklahoma, I think that'll bring a lot of confidence and a lot of momentum to this Texas team, and hopefully allow us to finish the season without a loss.
In the event that Texas does beat Oklahoma and they end up making the Big 12 championship game on December 12th, who do you foresee being the other representative in that game?
As of now, definitely probably Oklahoma State. If Oklahoma drops this game, they'll probably be out of it. But the Big 12, it can shift a lot of ways. Texas could drop more games to weaker opponents, and same goes with every other team. So really it can be up in the air, but more than likely Texas and OSU.
And then finally, do you think that the Big 12 has eliminated itself from playoff contention?
I'd like to say no, but I think Texas and Oklahoma were the two powerhouses that were we're the only ones that will be able to push for a playoff spot. And so unless Texas or Oklahoma State have really, really strong finishes to the season, I think a college football playoff spot is unlikely to be filled by a Big 12 team.
I happen to agree with you. Thanks for being available for an interview. Always good talking to you.
Of course.
And anytime you want to come on and talk about how awesome Texas Longhorns are or how bad Tom Herman is, feel free to give me a quick text and I'll get you on.
Yeah, for sure. I think this game this weekend will be a good test of how good Texas is.
Depending on the outcome,
and how the rest of our season will go.
Yeah, depending on the outcome, we might have to have you on again next week.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, Nick. We'll see you later.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, see ya. What's going on, guys? We are back with the final segment of the first episode of Save Saturdays U. Special thanks to Nicholas Trevino for coming on again. It was great talking to him about all things Texas and the Big 12. It's always nice to have that perspective from inside the stadium. But shifting over, let's look ahead to the week to come. Coming up tomorrow, we have Miami, Florida versus Clemson. This is a marquee matchup facing off two top 10 teams, number 7 in the country, and the top-ranked Clemson Tigers. Both teams are undefeated on the season, both teams featuring a Heisman candidate quarterback. Could it be the best game this season? I don't think so. Both teams are averaging 42 points, above 42 points, but Clemson has won the last two matchups in this series 92-3, including a 2017 rout in the ACC championship game that featured now Miami head coach Manny Diaz as the defensive coordinator for Miami. So if you're questioning whether Clemson would be able to move the ball against Miami's defense, I have some news for you. They can. Also of note, Trevor Lawrence has gone 314 passes without an interception. His last interception was October 19th of 2019. He's almost gone a complete calendar year without throwing an interception. And so I have reason to believe that there will be no appearances of the turnover chain this weekend. And Clemson will win this game and cover the 14-point spread. I'm taking Clemson 56-38. Pretty handedly. They're going to win this game handedly. I really like Derek King, and I'm really liking what Manny Diaz has done. They have some nice pieces in Miami, but you just look at the rosters. Miami's offensive line is weak. None of the starters on offensive line for Miami would even be on the 2 deep of the offensive line for Clemson. So I'm going to have to go with Clemson. Miami's offense will keep it interesting, maybe for a little while, but I would say by halftime, this game will be done, and Miami will end up getting a couple garbage time touchdowns to make it look a little nicer than what it would have been. But it's going to be Clemson. 56-38, Clemson covers. Shifting over to UNC Va-Tech, another ACC matchup featuring top 25 teams. Both teams are 2-0. Both teams coming off of a victory last week. This is a rematch of the longest game in ACC's history that happened last season, which saw Virginia Tech winning 43-41 after 6 overtimes. But I have a feeling that the result of this game is going to be a little bit different than last year. I have UNC taking the victory 23-21, mainly because UNC did, Boston College to 40 yards on the ground last week. Virginia Tech, a run-first team. So we know UNC can stop the run. That's the strength of the Hokies. And the passing game has been non-existent for the Hokies this season. Their projected starter Hendon Hooker has been unavailable for the majority of the season. So he'll either be starting his first game of the season against the 8th-ranked Tar Heels, or it'll be Braxton Biermeister, who the coaching staff in Virginia Tech, Justin Fuente, has shown he has no trust in. They only threw the ball 9 times last weekend against Duke. We'll see if the running game can get going against the Tar Heels. If it does, the game might end up with a Virginia Tech win. However, I do not foresee that happening. The Hokies will keep it close. I have it UNC 23-21, which is a Hokies cover. UNC favored by 4 points, but I think the Tar Heels will take this game and they will continue their climb up the top 25, hopefully presenting a bigger challenge to Clemson in the ACC championship game than they have had in recent years. Our final game we're looking at before this week gets underway is Florida versus Texas A&M. Florida's favored by 6.5, and I tend to believe that it's going to be much of the same this weekend. I got Florida winning 38-21, Florida winning and covering. You look at Florida's history, they cruised to a win last week against South Carolina, 38-24, and the Kyles are cooking. Kyle Pitts, 12 receptions, 227 yards, 6 touchdowns. I already told you why Kyle Pitts is an exceptional player. I don't need to get into it again, but Kyle Trask, 51 for 71, 684 yards, 10 touchdowns, and 1 interception in 2 games. You get a little quick math, that's 342 yards per game and 5 touchdowns. That's a Heisman pace. If Kyle Trask keeps it up, you'll be hearing his name when it comes time to determine the finalists for the Heisman. I don't know if he'll win it. Trevor Lawrence is looking really good this year. Derek King is looking very good this year. But he's playing exceptional football, and he's certainly in the conversation right now. On the other side of the ball, Texas A&M, they have looked horrible this season. They're still in the top 25, but their only win this year was a 17-12 victory over Vanderbilt, in which leading rusher Isaiah Spiller put 112 yards on the ground, and he's only at 147 now. So in their game against Alabama, he was held to 25 yards, 2.3 yards per carry. So this rushing game, the rushing game in College Station can be stopped. Florida, they're playing good football right now. Texas A&M, this is a strangely poor team out of Jimbo Fisher. I like Florida to win and to cover easily, 38-21. That's all the time I got for today's show. Next up, you can catch me on the Save Saturdays podcast airing tomorrow at 10 a.m. That one's ready to go. We got it set up to go live at 10 a.m., so be sure to check that out. Also, check me out on Offsides with Ethan Petrick on Mondays. That's our NHL hockey show. Did a mock draft last week. This week, we'll be doing a little bit of a early free agency reaction, some winners and losers from the draft, and I'll be giving my top 10 power ranking for the NHL last season heading into this next season. So be sure to check that out. And as always, you can check me out on Takeout Tuesdays, airing every Tuesday at 2. It's a really fun show. Will and I will be reviewing De Leon's, a Mexican restaurant here in Lincoln. Very popular. So be sure to check that out so you can see if it's a GOAT status, superstar, all-star. I don't have high hopes. I'm not expecting big things. We'll see. I've never been there. Could be a surprise. But as always, Save Saturdays.